Hello, hello. We are here, we are ready, we are beginning. Hello, everyone. My name is not Gina Femia. I am Elle Parker. I use they and she pronouns, and I'm calling in from, is this Lenape land? Yes. This is unceded Lenape land. This is Gina Femia's apartment. We are sharing a device tonight. But I'm just here to say thank you all for joining us on this stream. If you're here while it's live, fantastic. If you're joining us for the recording, also very grateful to have you listen to the amazing conversation about to happen. We are the Parsnip Ship. We are really excited to be doing a slightly different thing this fall where we are doing conversations, hosting conversations. We have some amazing plays that we have done with some really incredible playwrights. We have a rebroadcast of a past radio play we did with Matthew Lee Erlbach, with one of our guests tonight. That broadcast is happening next Wednesday, the 15th at 8 p.m. And leading up to that, we wanted to have a really fantastic conversation with these four players you're going to hear from tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Emmanuel Wilson.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I hope everyone can hear me. I am new to StreamYard, and it looks fabulous, but I want to make sure it's working for everyone. So welcome on this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are coming in. It's wonderful to share space with all of you. So we're going to just have a really great conversation about allyship in playwriting. And we've got four really wonderful statements. But before I move forward, I want to make sure that each of the writers here, we're sharing space with these amazing writers, can actually introduce themselves quickly so that we can get on to the conversation. So Matthew, we're going to start with you. If you can just introduce yourself, and then we can keep going, and then we're going to get into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Emmanuel. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Matthew Lee Erlbach. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a playwright, screenwriter, and community organizer from Chicago, currently in Brooklyn, New York, which, as I just heard, is the land of the Lenape, if I have that correct. I'm still learning openly.
Wonderful, wonderful. And please correct me if I mispronounce your name, Javier?
Yeah, it's Javi, like Javier.
Javi, there we go.
Hi.
I love it. Thank you.
Hi, I am Javier River DeBruin. I am also on Lenape Canarsie unceded territory in Brooklyn. Excited to be here with you all. My pronouns are they, them.
Wonderful. And Michelle, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle Tyrene Johnson. I'm jealous that I'm not in Brooklyn right now. I am in Louisville, Kentucky at this moment. I'm a Kansas Cityan, however, and my pronouns are she and her. And I'm a playwright, if I didn't say that. I'm a playwright.
And Gina, please.
Hi, my name is Gina Femia, and I am, and my with Al on the unceded Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a playwright and performer.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And my name is Emmanuel Wilson. I'm the executive director of the Dramatists Guild, and I am here on the land of the Lenape, Times Square. So hopefully there's no sirens in the background. So I would love to get us started with the first statement. Again, we're here to have a conversation about allyship as it pertains to writing, and also as it pertains to what an individual can or can't write. Right now, we're having a very large conversation about intersectionality and how it matches with those who are not only the authors, but are also production staff and such. But here we are going to talk to writers and get their opinion on that. So just bear with me for 1 second. I'm just going to put this first statement. I can write whatever I want. I can write whatever I want. Who wants to sort of ruminate on that as we sort of talk about that statement? Come on, don't be afraid now. I know we have opinions here. Come
I'll-
on.
I can speak up. I'm not afraid to be opinionated.
There you go.
My answer to that, I can write whatever I want, but whatever I want has an effect and has consequences. And as a writer, I want to understand that. And yeah, that's my hot take.
Okay, Matthew, please.
I want to second Javi. I think being very mindful of the consequences of free speech and going to where the story is really important. Doing due diligence. Like, I want to agree with that. I also want to disagree with that statement. I can write whatever I want. It has a lot of texture. I want to always go to where the silence is. I want to make the invisible visible. And I think that also has lots of consequences. So I have to be really mindful of that. So yeah, I second Javi.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I can write whatever I want, but what I can't do is control how people receive it. And that is always the issue with people who get into the whole, well, I can write whatever I want. You're saying I can't write what I want? You can write whatever you want. You just don't get to, be in charge of whether you have done it so poorly that people are having a strong reaction to it.
Gina, please. Oh, we can't hear you. It's okay. It's all right. We're here with you.
I still haven't figured out technology. But I agree with what everybody's saying. So I think that it's that complication of, or that feeling of like, well, I can write whatever I want to be able to write whatever I want. But honestly, like it depends on how it's received by other people. You have to listen to the responses if you feel like if you just write whatever you want. Yeah, I think, like, of course you can, but there's a lot that goes into that, and you have to be able to listen to what other people have to say.
Can we just unpack some of these statements here, just in terms of what is the responsibility of a writer when you are writing? What responsibility do you have when you say, okay, here's the story I'm going to write? What responsibility do you have to whatever respective audience or to your characters there? Just unpacking some of the statements I'm hearing.
I think it depends where you are in your writing. I think for me, when I'm writing a first draft, my only responsibility is to write it. When I'm editing and when I'm rewriting, that's when I think it's important to really come in with a critical eye, and it can be helpful once you're at a certain stage to receive feedback, because you might think you might mean something and think it's coming through one way, and that's not how people are hearing it. And you get the decision to choose whether you're going to take that feedback in. No one is I don't think any writers are like a victim of audiences. We have agency over what we write, and we have agency over how we receive critical feedback. And I think that if we use it as an opportunity to get excited about growing as people and learning new things, then I think it only makes our work stronger.
Any follow-ups to that?
Yeah, I would say our responsibility is to the truth, and not everyone is going to like truth. The truth is radical, and I think that that's a good thing, and that's a challenging thing. So I think that at the end of the day, it's up to the writer to do their due diligence to make sure that all that work and research and care and compassion is part of the process of getting to the truth. And maybe not necessarily in the presentation of it. I don't think that audiences necessarily need or should always be coddled. Also depends on the piece and what you're doing with it. But for me, it is about the revelation of truth. And I think that's the responsibility.
Gina, Michelle, do you have any thoughts on sort of the responsibility of the author in this area?
I think that one of the things I totally agree with what Javi said about your first responsibility is to yourself and your writing. I mean, you just have to kind of just get it out there because you're the only I. But then once you let it out to the world, even if the world is just one friend, then you have to take responsibility for maybe your instinct and your truth is a small t and not a big T.
Gina, do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I just resoundingly agree with what everybody is saying. And I think this idea of truth is really interesting because everybody's truth differs. And I think it depends on who and like your power and privilege in whatever moments that you're trying to write towards or within. Because your definition of what is true might not be the most useful one in what it is you're writing and exploring. So I think like it always just depends. And I know that when I write anything, I try to go into it with like as open as a heart and mind as possible to know that I might be receiving feedback that like is what I perceived as the truth is not actually, in a way that I need to re-examine within myself. So I find that there's like so much responsibility in writing that often gets kind of shirked, or there's a lot of fear in being critiqued and criticized. But I always try to have as open a mind and heart as possible in those regards.
I love how we're talking about truth because I think it leads us into our next statement because we are having a conversation right now about what truths can I write about? Can I write about my own? Can I write about someone else's? So our next statement is my intersectionality should have nothing to do with my writing. Let's just hit on that for a sec. My intersectionality, even if you want to unpack the way that that statement is structured, my intersectionality should have nothing to do with my writing. Are we responsible for putting who we are on the stage, or is there an openness there to tell the kinds of stories we want to tell, even if that differs from who we are?
I mean, I think that ends up being why we have these big fights in playwriting and theater, because some people, let's just be honest, are not used to being told that they can't do something or that they shouldn't do something, or it's not best for them to do something. And so, they're saying, I'd use the word demographics instead of intersectionality to be maybe a little bit more clear, but my demographics shouldn't prohibit me from writing something. And it's like the previous statement, it doesn't prohibit you, but you don't get to decide how your, Wikipedia knowledge of a group or of an issue isn't really good enough.
What's to add to that?
I mean, I'm going to just say I don't like should statements in general, but again, like I'm here for like, write whatever the fuck you want to write, excuse my French, but but like you're not writing in a vacuum. You're going to want to share this with someone else. So like, if I want to write about I think that it's like not anyone else's call to say how much of our personal experiences end up in our writing. But I think that like there is, if you're writing from a place of an emotional resonance that like you connect with, I think then your audiences will start to connect with that. And so like, I don't know, for me, it's like my intersectionality can't not be in my writing because I'm writing it from my perspective. And my perspective is a result of many intersecting identities. So I don't see how my intersectionality could have nothing to do with my writing, but I also don't feel like I have to write a story about someone who is exactly like me and having exactly my experiences. I think that's not necessarily helpful to like limit ourselves to that.
Mm. Who wants to add to that or counter or?
Yeah, I sorry, go ahead.
No, please, I keep going after Javi, so please.
Break the cycle. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. What Javi said. There are ways that my intersectional identities like will show up in my writing without me even realizing it's happening, because it's just so much a part of me and it's so much a part of breathing that that's just going to happen. And I do write about my like specific events in my life, both fictionalized as well as more autobiographicalized. And I like doing it both. And I also like to explore things that are emotional truths rather than like factual truths that have happened to me. And I think that when I think about my own intersectionality, I think about the things that are both seen and unseen within me, and like how those might show up in the characters that I write, and more of the characters that I write than even the stories that I tell. But I think that it's one of those things of like it's impossible not to, and it's also important to again think about whose story are you talking over somebody's story that perhaps is to be told in their own lived experience. Like those are the things that I constantly think about when I go into writing.
Matthew.
Yes, to what everybody is saying. I think that whether we intend to or not, we are ambassadors for the communities in which we are a part of, from which we are born. And as Gina was saying, you know, the seen and the unseen, there's always going to be, you know, my grandparents came here as refugees. I am, you know, in the LGBTQ community. I don't write stories about those things on the nose, but I certainly write about those things in other ways. I certainly write about, I just wrote something recently about the Central African Republic. It's really about conflict minerals. It's really about exploitation, and it's a farce. It's a comedy, and at the center of it is this white guy who's thrown into this situation, and it's working with an indigenous worker and these international, eccentric actors who are exploiting this mine. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but that was very much myself inside every character for sure. And at a certain point in the process, I understood, oh, wow, the intersectionality here, people trying to, really figure out what it is to do the right thing stumblingly inside of chaos. And so I think that there's a psychological part of our writing, which is, this is true in a dream. You are every character in a dream. I think you're every character in your story also. So I think that we are diplomats from the communities that we are from and that we're a part of, whether it's, on the nose or not.
Any other thoughts? Because I always question whether, I know when I write, I am always labeled as a Black playwright, and I am Black and I am a playwright. Both are very, very true. But I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and is there, as we widen the conversation, finally, what it means for the human experience and how we displayed it on stage in terms of character and structure, and also the individuals that put those shows together. Just unpacking this statement, is there an undue burden on those who are receiving opportunities to, again, say, well, I am a Black playwright, I am a trans playwright, I am this, therefore the people will only respond to me if I write this story? Is there an undue burden? Because in our society, we don't necessarily label Tennessee Williams is a, white playwright. It's just a playwright. You know what I mean? We don't, so is there an undue burden there?
But he is labeled as a Southern playwright, right?
True.
And that ends up being the thing that we always do, is that we label people by the distinction that puts them in the category that is viewed as an outlier. And so, I've had, a few professions in my life. And so I'm used to that always being the case. As a Black woman, I'm never just an X. I'm a Black woman X. I'm a Black X. I rarely even get to be just a woman X, So that's what we do, particularly in America, I think.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an undue burden. Because the fact of, I think like it's exactly, what you were saying, like it's what distinguishes us, right? But distinguishes us from what? And it's like, what is still centered as, we still have this idea of a central narrative that is not what, most of us here today are, for one reason or another. And so when we come to tell our stories, it's like, what's the thing about you, And I think that's for convenience, and sometimes I think it's for marketing, and then it's for like social clout, and that's all that. And like, yes, we do carry that burden, because like if I'm coming in telling a story as a trans playwright, I can't possibly represent all trans people or all trans playwrights. I can't possibly represent every perspective and every experience, and that is a burden that I think gets placed onto us. Is to like speak for everybody, and that's just not possible. So I think the more we decentralize the idea of narrative, the more we can have the introduction of labels as like a celebration of our experiences and the experiences we're highlighting in our stories, more than like what makes you different.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think when we watch movies, I think there's a greater suspension of disbelief, because I like Marvel movies, and there's a superhero, and that can be anyone. And then for some reason, when it comes to the theater and how things are programmed, it always seems to feel a little bit okay. Here is the Black play. Here's the play by the LBG. Okay, great. And we've done our work. And that I'm actually gonna switch up the statements right now, because I think this is leading into. I'm actually going to go to the fourth statement next. So if a different statement shows up on screen, let me know, because I think that talks about the way we select for seasons and the way we select opportunities. Because the next statement I'm going to go with is the way plays and musicals are selected for opportunities or influenced by optics and analytics is traumatizing as fuck. Like, it is traumatizing. I think when you lay that on the other question of, okay, here I am as a writer, I sit and I create whatever stories I want to create. Hopefully I am responsible with my work. Hopefully I've done due diligence, and now I present myself to the market, and the market can oftentimes put me in this box that I never wanted to be in the first place. But because you have funders, because you have an audience, okay, we're looking at everything analytical, everything's data now. I can be reduced to a point that maybe I'm not interested in. Like what you were talking about, I never get to be just a woman next. So let's unpack this. Let's unpack this statement a little bit. The ways plays and musicals are selected for opportunities and are influenced by optics and analytics is traumatizing as fuck. Any experiences to share or thoughts on that statement?
I mean, I think it's a balancing act. I mean, I have as big a problem with people stripping me of all identity when they're picking something. I recently just got some feedback on a play that I submitted to something where the person was writing about the play. And I thought it was really interesting how they went out of their way not to write about race. I mean, to the point where it was laughable because it's like race was a component of the plot. So if you're mentioning everything but race while saying you don't like the play, I mean, so I think it's a balance between it being tokenized versus it being stripped.
I love that. I love that. When you say that word token, I feel that so deeply because I think, as Gina was saying, I think we all write from a sense that we do want to have an open heart and we do want to connect. Sometimes we want to challenge you in the best way possible, right? However, whatever that means for you. And then to sort of be reduced to that, to the slot, right? To the slot in there. It's traumatizing. And any other thoughts on that?
This is kind of, it's related. Many years ago, the Goodman in Chicago did a production of Proof with a Black director and an all-Black cast. And they marketed it as Proof with a Black director and an all-Black cast. Now, nowhere in that play does it mention anything about ethnicity or anything. So it just so happened that when it was cast on Broadway, it was all white people. And I knew a couple of the actors in the play, and I just thought to myself, like, one, this is great, but it felt weird that it was being marketed this way because it felt in some way, and I'm a white person, so you know I am open to my perception of this being completely wrong, but it felt like it tokenized the production. Like we're doing like a special version of this when actually you just could have done it and let the casting and the direction speak for itself. And so I often feel like, you know, to what Michelle was saying, it's interesting. There is a very fine line between tokenizing and celebrating. And I think that it feels like we're very much in that conversation right now because the intention feels like course correction, but it also feels like I gotta say it feels a little sneaky because I don't see the people behind the scenes and the people running the institutions reflecting the decisions of what is happening on the stage. And until that happens, it's gonna feel like tokenization. It's gonna feel like, look, we're doing the Black Proof. And that's how I feel.
Don't talk about it, be about it. We can smell fakes from a mile away.
Right.
Although one minor thing that I will push back on is the idea that the Broadway production happened to be a white cast. I think that's very intentional and reflective of like racial dynamics as well. But if we want to unpack that, I think that a lot of times the industry has this idea that to get to equity, we have to go the like colorblind casting route, which to me is like the latest iteration of like, I don't see color. And it's like, you know, it's not helpful to like pretend this isn't a thing, you know, like, but I think that like you can really tell when you're working with folks who are just excited about your work and are excited to hear about your perspectives and will celebrate from where that comes to the extent that you want that to be a part of it, right? You can feel it as an artist when you're working with people who like actually care versus people who are like, oh, we got criticized for not, you know, being inclusive of X, Y, and Z. Like, let's just play this by the numbers game. And I think, you know, the problem with theater in a capitalistic society is that we want to make theater by the numbers, and that's how you make bad theater. Sorry to say, that's in my opinion.
And I'm gonna say this too is, you know, send me an email, call, or letter about this. But I hate when folks blackface a play, so to speak, when you could have just programmed a play by a Black playwright. Like if you really want to see Black bodies on the stage, there's plenty of people writing plays that require Black bodies on the stage, or brown bodies. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that, you know, Black, what, you name the demographic, there are people writing to that demographic.
Yeah.
Gina, you were nodding your head. Do you have anything to share on this?
Yeah, I mean, I just going back to this statement, thinking about plays that I write. So I'm a queer person, but not all of my plays might fit into that category. That LGBTQ plus theater company might be looking for. And I find that even though all of my plays that I write are inherently queer because I am queer, if it doesn't show up in the way that they understand it, they will not program it. And I will not be their queer playwright. And I just, that is always something of frustration to me as well, where it's like, I've also gotten statements. So I've written about like 2 plays with male protagonists. And so that too those are not acceptable if they're looking for the female playwright, because I have the male protagonist. So why would I give space to men? The play is still through a perspective that is not a cis male, but it is not good enough because it doesn't fit into the category for which they are clearly looking. They're trying to tick boxes. And so that I feel like is also part of this, like having to take on that burden of, oh, I am this person, but I'm not enough of this person under this gaze. And that's just something that goes back to like, I should be able to write whatever stories I want, thinking of it in terms of if I don't fit that, like if it doesn't fit your idea of queerness, if it doesn't fit your idea of non-cis maleness, I should still be able to write it and still be celebrated for who I am. But that's something that I think is traumatizing too within this industry.
Well, I love the fact that you bring me up, because I think that goes to just unpacking the statement a little bit. Who gets to decide this? Like, who gets to decide? I thought that writers actually, in the conversation with the audience, proposing ideas, pushing against whatever, or celebrating whatever, we actually were the ones who got to decide that. We were the ones to say, hey, here are the ideas I'm playing with. Here's my idea of queerness. Here's my idea of this. Here's my idea. And if you don't like it, okay, I understand, right? When did that switch? Like, and how does that become traumatizing, right? Because if we're talking about allyship, there is a responsibility, I think, from the theater to the writer to program in a way where the writer's voice is celebrated and the writer's ideas are celebrated. And if we keep going into that, oh, I'm coming to you with a play, but it's not queer enough for you, it's not this enough for you, it sort of goes back to that point where we sort of reduce our writing to something that we never wanted it to be in the first place. So any thoughts on the multiple questions I just threw out to you in that statement there? Like, who gets to decide? I thought we had the responsibility to decide that.
I think we have a very big power in what stories we tell. And I think that there's a lot of fear from people who don't have that same power. And there's a lot of controlling of it. You know, if you can't write a story, but you can gatekeep whose story is shared, that's like a real power. And I think, the way that theater in the States has come to evolve, it's like theater should be a place of sharing, right? And an opportunity, and it should be a calling in, not this like ivory tower that like maybe you can afford to see and maybe you can afford to have your work produced in. I think like we really moved away from theater as a community affair, which is, I think, which dilutes the power of storytellers, because we're only as powerful as we get the opportunity to share a story. And for every new medium that pops up, that's a new way for us to tell our story. Quick as you can, there are going to be gatekeepers who find a way to do that. But like, So, and then, not to be like a broken record, but like, so how do we decentralize this stuff in a way that like brings power back to storytellers?
Yeah, Matthew, please.
I think part of it is figuring out whether or not are we art or are we commerce? Well, obviously we're both, but we're run by a model, a 501c3 model that has done a lot of good, but it also does a lot of harm. And so when you have an institution in a community whose board is not reflective of the community, that's a problem, because that secular churchness then is lost. So I think we have to look at the models of ownership, of funding, of all of this in order to give power to the storyteller, give back power to the storyteller. And I think that's part of the issue too, is the economic models that are driving this. And I think only until we address that, we're really going to be able to do the thing which you just said, which is essential for us. And this ivory towerification, I think MFAs are a huge part of this also. That's part of the gatekeeping. I think that not everyone has access to grad school. Not everyone can afford the debt of grad school. And so we've just created a new gate, and we've created new ways in which to keep people out of the most neighborhood art, which is come gather around the campfire and let me tell you a story. We've added new locks and keys to it. And I think that's a huge problem too, that the literary managers and directors of new play development and artistic directors have got to look. Yes, we've now created a system where by going to grad school gives you access. And by the way, this is to say nothing ill about people who've gone to grad school. It makes total sense. And you want to refine your skill, and this is all very important. But what has happened is like there is this ossification now and a new moat built around the American theater. And I think we have to look at that also and build new bridges.
Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, visually, I have no idea what age anybody is on my screen other than knowing my own age. And I think I'm a little bit older than all of you. And I guess I'm just cynical enough to feel like it's always been about money. Everything is about money, like there's no store that is open now that has been open for 30 years,
right?
For example, that's still open, for any other reason than it keeps making money. I mean, we can go to anything, and its existence is premised on, does it make money? Does it play to the people who pay for what the product is? And what we do is a product. So when you say, when did it cease being the writers? It's always the writers. I just, nobody's paying me to open up my laptop and let them read my play over their shoulder.
Right.
The difficulty, I'll just throw this in here really quickly. The difficulty with that is nobody's making their money in regional theater just from box office alone. And that's just not happening. So the product, all these theaters would shut down if not for the subsidization of corporations and grants and government funding. So it's not a business model that sustains itself. So is our product keeping the store open? Because it's a combination of product sale and all this extra money. And that's why I think the whole economic model is just so baffling. Sorry, Gina.
And to add another layer to it though, I just want to say that to that end, then our intersectionality is keeping the store open at this point, because when it's just not going to cut it if as a theater company you're presenting a certain grouping of work anymore. And so that's exactly why it leads to this mentality of gotta check those boxes. And I'm just really curious how we can reharness that power, turn it back the other way.
Yeah, Gina, I want to make sure you have.
One thing so I am a lifelong Brooklynite. I was born and raised here, and I didn't just come here to do art, which no shade to anybody who does, but it's just I have a different perspective, I feel, from some. And the thing that frustrates me most about New York City theater is that they have no interest in engaging anybody from any of the outer boroughs at all. They're more interested in engaging people from Westchester than they are from the people that live in the Bronx, in southern Brooklyn, out in Queens. And by New York City theater, I of course mean the big, not only Broadway, but the other off-Broadway houses that are centralized in Manhattan. And that's just something, as I write for Brooklyn, I write for people, working class people of Brooklyn. I come from working class background. And it frustrates me to know that if one of those theater houses were to produce my play, they would not want to invite the audience in that I'm specifically writing for. And that there's a disinterest there because it's hard to engage them, as I've been told to my face, which means that they don't want to do the work to engage them, which means that they would have to come up with a way to have folks come in not only monetarily, but also taking into account that they work different hours, that perhaps like matinees would actually work best for them. Perhaps they don't want to make the trip in. Can we bring theater to them? There's no interest in having, even starting the conversation there from the conversations I've tried to start. So it's something that I'm always thinking about too, in terms of like, if I could bring people, like my art to people, I would. But those conversations with those gatekeepers are such non-starters that it's hard to have those answers. But I keep pushing. But
yeah, well, native New Yorker, there you go. Come on, yeah,
yeah.
right there with you.
Nice.
I love how earlier it was said, it's always been about money, and money is a reality because especially we want to make sure writers get paid for their work. Just putting that out into the universe, writers should always get paid for their work. Always, 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 because writers spend an enormous amount of time being unpaid for their work because it takes, depending on the writer, it takes a long time to generate work. And in many cases, writers are not paid for a rehearsal. So, but that's a different conversation there. But is it not only about money, but is it about fear, right? Because if we are talking about allyship, and we are talking about this sort of trickle-down model that I am the theater, I have to program, my shows don't make the revenue I need, therefore I have to apply for a grant, I have to go to a funder, and sometimes it's so specific that I've got to meet those particular needs, therefore I'm going out to try to find the work that matches the grants that I need to survive, and on the flip side, the writers are out there writing all of the amazing stories, and instead of finding the writers and say, wait a second, I love your voice, I love your technique, I love that, and let me celebrate that, where we have theater that is celebrating voices, right? You don't have to love all of the ideas in the play, you don't have to love, but it is about finding that voice, and does it speak to me, does it speak to these people? But is there a fear in this, and is that where the trauma comes in? When we go back to write, right? Because now, if I don't write this way, I will never get produced. And then do we just create this cycle that, maybe again, talk to us and let me define what it means to be trans or black or queer or Jewish and if there's a writer who has a different idea, that's great. Let's program them both. Let's have, let's do that. But that was a long statement. But how much fear are we dealing with? And how does that affect our writing? Silence. It's all right. I know you're thinking. It's all right. Jump on in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not afraid of never getting produced because I know that I will, because I know that there will be people, even if they're not in like the bigger theaters, that will resonate with the work and it will get done. And I have faith in that. So it's frustrating more than fearful for me. And there was a time where I was writing artistic statements and applications, and I realized that I was exploiting my own lived trauma to just try to fall into the box of like, I noticed that you resonate when I write about trauma. Well, let me just like give it to you. And then it still not be enough. And that was something that I realized, I didn't even realize I was doing it because it's so insidious of like, oh, this is like, I'm starting to get traction. And then during the last year when things were truly shut down, I started realizing what I was doing. And I was like, I don't know if I want to exploit myself in this way, actually. But there are still stories I want to tell that are connected to like me that I can be in control of. And it doesn't matter if these gatekeepers say yes, because somebody else will. So that's how there's community too, beyond the gatekeepers.
That really resonates with me so much, Gina. Like, I feel like I hate writing artistic statements for that reason. Like, you don't want to know why I like to write what I write. You want to know who I am. Like, you want the rundown, and what does it take from me, like, to pour myself out for you in that way? Read my work. It's there. But like, also as someone who is like straddles a lot of multiple identities and is like very ambiguous in lots of ways, on paper, in reality, like if I don't spell it out for them, I have the fear that like they won't know what they're getting, and then I won't have opportunities. So like I'll get boxed out either way. But I agree that I think you can let that fear rule you, but like then it takes away from something. I think like and I don't know, I guess it's like case by case. Like I'm not going to try to write for what I think people want me to write, because that defeats the point of me writing at all. But like if occasionally I'm gonna like, you know, sometimes I might just be like, okay, well today here I'll like do this song and dance for you if it gets to something that can be useful to me. And then some days I won't, and I think you just but I also think there's fear on the other side of it. I think there's fear for programmers of like what they don't know or understand or relate to, and rather than being like just learn, y'all, just learn about other people and other people's lives, just try to learn, and then it's like not so scary, and like you can also like it just like opens up a lot more that you can understand and program and like be a part of, and brings more people into your community. Like everyone wins from that. But I think fear actually like on the other side stands in the way a lot.
I would say I'm not fearful. I'm just frustrated. I mean, I work a full-time job out of theater because I like to eat out too much, and I have a new car note now, and I like to, you know, have too many streaming services. And so I work, and then I'm frustrated that my real work, my writing isn't my work. And then it's just sort of the back and forth between having the job that I need to have when I feel like my real job is writing, but that can't be my real job because, you know, who's a full-time writer? You know, that's the back and forth I go through daily. You know.
Matthew, do you have anything to share on this?
Well, I definitely want to talk at some point about getting paid for rehearsal. Emmanuel, like this is huge, big.
We're talking about allyship now. Okay.
Well,
okay, you know, there we go.
Let me say that being a good ally is economic justice also. And being a good ally is paying people fairly for a living wage for their time and their experience, for their labor. So, you know, you said that, and I just want to run with that down the track a little bit and say that, you know, this is really important for all playwrights to be thinking about, certainly in this economic and cultural reckoning that we're in right now. And to Michelle's point, you know, of the 3 playwrights who make their living writing plays, and, you know, like, this is a huge thing. You can't make a living being a playwright solely. And there's a lot to be said about that, which I'm very interested in talking about. But to the point of this fear, yeah, I think that, you know, getting put into a box to fill a slot is definitely a consideration. Early on in my career, you know, I wasn't writing about, you know, and really I want to write about what I'm curious about. I'm not necessarily interested in exploiting my own life experience to put it on stage just to have an opportunity. I am, you know, interested in lots of things that are outside of myself that I find myself in, and I identify with those things that are far away from myself. And, you know, I feel that writing, for me at least, is a public service. I think that this is, you know, this is part of my project in any case. And so it doesn't rule over me. It's certainly consideration, and it's frustrating, but it's not something that I'm super fearful of, which might say something about me, actually.
I think as we discuss allyship in terms of all of the ways that we are an ally, I'm an ally in what I choose to write and how I respect the intersectionality of the characters and the stories and the communities that I'm trying to tell the stories of. But then also there's this other part in being an ally where allyship is much more about just programming a slot. It's all the way, it's the track all the way down in terms of how our producers and theaters unknowingly and sometimes knowingly reducing us to that data point, right? Where it does feel like when you are submitting your work to a theater, you're applying for a scholarship.
Yeah.
You know, you're applying for a college. It's a college application. Please tell me why I should program your play. When it's like, well, I'm sorry, I wrote the play or musical, and if someone can read it, and if it worked for you, it's your, you know, then let's do that. I'd like to get a little bit more personal in the last statement that we're going to tackle, and if you can really talk about it from your perspective. I am the last statement is I am responsible for the characters I create and to the communities I represent. When you hear a statement like that, as you are a writer, how do you express that statement? Whoever wants to go for it.
I agree with that statement. I am responsible for the characters I create and the communities I represent. I am not responsible for the response, but I have to own the response. And I think that this is the due diligence of a storyteller. I have to be responsible for what's on stage. It's mine. I did it. I wrote the blueprint. You know, like I made the blueprint for this building. I'm responsible for the building. So I completely agree with that statement.
But sometimes when we're talking about this topic, we forget that none of us are all knowing. I mean, one of the biggest slams I've ever gotten as a playwright, and I deserved every bit of it, was I wrote a Native American character in a play of mine based on what I thought was accuracy based on where I come from, and a Native American actress from another region thought that I did not do, you know, justice by that. I mean, me being Black doesn't mean that I can write all things for all people. And, you know, sometimes we have to both take responsibility and take the hit. I mean, keep it pushing. Keep it pushing, you know what I mean? And not make it all about you and not get, you know, defensive. But I mean, I just think that that's part of responsibility for the characters we create, is that we don't always get it right either because we're in a marginalized group.
Yeah, I agree. And I would change the statement personally to, I am responsible for the characters I create and accountable to the communities I represent. Because I can't be responsible for a community, whether it's my own or someone else's. Like, I think that's overly centralizing my own narrative's importance in any community, frankly. But I think, like, yeah, like like you said, Michelle, like it's like if someone checks me, then I can be accountable for that. I can own if I write something, and I can change it. You can always change it,
Right.
or you can decide, you know what, I did that, and I'm gonna put that aside and move on, and like work from a different place and from a place of knowing, and it for me, I find it particularly interesting because like am I am Latina and like, but I am also like Latina and white and mixed, a whole bunch of things. And I didn't grow up in like steeped really heavily in like Latina communities. And so there's things about my own culture, my own heritage that like I've had to learn as I move through life. And part of my experience of my heritage is being in that space of openness and learning. And so like sometimes when I am writing, like as a Latina playwright, I feel like it comes through that like there's things that I may like I'm gonna get wrong, like sometimes in creating characters that are like maybe even close to my own, like boxes or whatever that I would check. And so for me, I feel like that state of learning and curiosity and based in a sense of like respect and humanity is like what we need. I read in a book recently about like the difference between an it and thou relationship, meaning like whether you see something as an object or whether you see it as a fully realized thing. And I think that in particular, when we're writing about folks with different, experiences and backgrounds from ourselves, it's really easy to write it outside as this like static thing that we're viewing and not as a living person or like and not with the nuance that we would give to our own experiences. And I think like whoever I'm writing, whatever characters I'm writing, I want to try to write with a degree of empathy and try to understand and try to learn. And then if that falls flat and I did a bad job of that, all I can do is learn and try to do better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gina, do you want to share anything? I want to make sure I get to everybody here.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Emmanuel. I agree with everything everybody has said, and I think like it's unfortunate sometimes when we lose sight of the fact that as playwrights we're able to change everything, and anything can change at any given moment, and sometimes like that's what is necessary to receive the feedback. And I've done this many times, to receive the feedback and make the changes without making it about you. I know that anytime I go to write, I try to look at people as full humans and write from a place of empathy. And I also know that so things like, my whiteness will always creep in. And so it's my responsibility to take accountability for that when it happens and it's not truthful, and either change, rewrite. Rewriting is my favorite part of writing, or just set it aside and realize that it wasn't my story to tell, or that it's just, I made the attempt. I think that we're such a product-driven culture that it's a shame that we can't just do the experiment of the thing and then allow that to be where it ends, because then it seems like it's a failure, but it's not. It's something that's aided your own learning and experience, and you'll move forward with that. Like I know I've moved forward with that knowledge, and it's made me a better playwright. And even if I've discarded a play, it doesn't mean I didn't write that play. It means it's no longer necessary to work on. So that's how I view things.
This is, I hope for everyone that's been watching this conversation, and I hope for the writers who have been participating in this conversation, I hope you feel that this has been a thoughtful and wonderful conversation. I think as we talk about allyship, I think there are two parts. I think there is a responsibility for the writer, and there's an accountability on that side, right? But there's also, if we're talking about allyship, once we move beyond the creation of our work, there is who are our allies out there, who will understand the vulnerable place that we come from. It is a vulnerable thing to sit and write and to then offer that up for judgment. You've got to build yourself up and say, all right, whatever happens, happens, and let you know where I can make it better, I will do my best. And where are the allies? And as we talk about the shift and change in our theater, do people understand when they are an ally, when they're not? Who are our allies? You know, and if anybody wants to close us out here, because we're at the hour mark, I don't want it to be my voice. I want to be the writer's voice in the room. Anything you want to say?
I just want to say real quick, I don't think we ever get to claim allyship for ourselves. I think allyship is bestowed upon you by the group that you are paying respect and collaboration to. That would be my final thought.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any other final thoughts?
I just think that allyship needs to center on what you do instead of how you feel.
Matthew, Gina, anything you want to share as a final thought on allyship?
I concur.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're at that hour mark. I really appreciate you sharing this space with us, and just thank you.
Thank
all right,
you.
this is wonderful. This was an honor. And the last thing I will say is pay your writers. Pay your writers. Don't ask them for doing that for free. They're already doing stuff for free. You don't want to do that, okay? Let's make sure people can eat and build lives for themselves. Come on now. So that's my final word. Okay. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.